We thank you, Father, for the opportunity of coming together and studying the book of Daniel and Revelation, which are the two books that you have told us are going to guide us through the final moments of Earth's history. Father, I just pray that those that are on their way here may be able to come, that we may be able to study, that your Holy Spirit and your angels may be here to guide us, to open our minds to things that perhaps are new to us. I just pray that every word that I say may be the word that you have put into my mouth, Father, that we may be able to dig deeply into this book and be able to realize how close we are to the very last moments of Earth's history. As we see our country, as we see the world in the condition that we find it today, even people that are not studying are realizing that something great and decisive is about to take place. And Father, we just want to be able to be ready to meet you. Without you, we cannot understand this book, and so at this moment I just pray that in a very special way you might touch each and every one of us. Thank you for your love. Thank you more than anything for Jesus, for dying in the cross for us and for giving us the opportunity of knowing what we know today and being able to be a little bit more prepared than we would be had we not met you, Father. Do whatever it takes in each of our lives to make it into heaven, I pray. In Jesus' name, amen.
Amen.
Okay, the ram and the he-goat. The battle that commences the final moments of Earth's history. Daniel, God's prophets for the last days. Daniel was honored by God as his ambassador. His wonderful prophecies as recorded by him in chapters 7 to 12. By the way, whenever I'm quoting, this just goes with my background. I mean, it's just in me. When you see quotation marks, this is a quote. It's coming from somewhere. If it's not in quotation marks, it's my language, but I try to put it. I try to back up everything that I say with something that's credible and not me. His wonderful prophecies as recorded by him in chapters 7 to 12 of the book bearing his name were not fully understood even by the prophet himself. But before his life labors closed, he was given the blessed assurance that at the end of the days, that wasn't 150 years ago, that's now. In the closing period of this world's history, he would again be permitted to stand in his slot place. Now you may say, well, how do we know that now we're really in the end of the time? Well, you know what? Now even the people in the world that are not religionists are saying, wow, this is weird. What we're seeing in crime, what we're seeing in the financial stock market, what we're seeing, everybody's talking about it. It's not just some people that would have been doomsayers before. It was not given him to understand, this quote continues, it was not given him to understand all that God had revealed of the divine purpose. Shut up the words and seal the book. Now she's quoting the Bible. He was directed concerning his prophetic writings. These were to be sealed even to the time of the end. Go thy way, Daniel, the angel once more directed the faithful messenger of Jehovah. For the words are closed up and sealed till the time of the end. Go thou thy way till the end be, for thou shalt rest and stand in thy lot at the end of the days. Have you noticed how many times here we're talking about the end of the days? And today most people in the world have no idea what Daniel is all about. But Daniel is specifically pointing to the last moments of Earth's history. And everything that Daniel saw, John the Revelator in the book of Revelation saw, and they talked to each other. As we near the close of this world's history, the prophecies recorded by Daniel demand our special attention, as they relate to the very time in which we are living. With them should be linked the teachings of the last book of the New Testament Scriptures. That was written in Prophets and Kings, 1915, page 547. Daniel 7, an overview from Babylon to the second coming of Christ. When you buy a book today, the first thing that happens when you open that book, you see the contents in the front. And it tells you this book has 42 chapters. Each chapter is about such, and it gives you an idea of what the book is doing. Daniel 7, I believe, is an overview of the chapters. Remember that Ellen White said chapters 7 to 12. Why 7 to 12? Because chapters 1 through 6 of Daniel are historic. It's about the lion's den, it's about Babylon, Media, Persia, Greece, and Rome. It's all history to let us know that Daniel was inspired by God. But Daniel's chapter 7 through 12 is applicable to us in the last moments of Earth's history. What Daniel 7 does, it gives you an overview of chapters 7 through 12. And then as soon as Daniel 7 finishes, Daniel 8 commences with the last moments of Earth's history. I will make thee know what shall be in the last end of the indignation. For at the time appointed the end shall be. The ram which thou sawest having 2 horns are the kings of Media and Persia. This is Daniel 8, 19 and 20. It's saying, I will make thee know what shall be in the last end of the indignation. In other words, you come to the end of time, to the very end of time, and that is when Daniel 8 is applicable. As we shall see in this study, when the United Nations, led by the United States, do to Iran and Syria what they did to Iraq, then this battle will commence. How close are we to this crisis? You have seen how we are completely broke in our nation today. What broke us? Everybody says the war on Iraq. Well, why did we invade Iraq? Bush has taken a lot of heat over this issue. You know what? People don't understand why we invaded Iraq. You're going to understand why. It's a prophecy. It had to be fulfilled. But if I told you today, we're going to do the very same thing to Iran, you would say, oh, you're crazy. We don't have money. We're broke. People would throw him out of office. It's going to happen, and it's getting ready to happen very soon now. The Last Crisis. This is the title of this writing. She called it The Last Crisis, as was shown to Ellen White sometime between 1904 and 1909. The Spirit of God is gradually but surely being withdrawn from the earth. Plagues and judgments are already falling upon the despisers of the grace of God. The calamities by land and sea, the unsettled state of society, the alarms of war are portentous. They forecast approaching events of the greatest magnitude. The agencies of evil are combining their forces and consolidating. They are strengthening for the last great crisis. This is what she said. Great changes are soon to take place in our world, and the final movements will be rapid ones. The conditions of things in the world, shows that troublous times are right upon us. The daily papers are full of indications of a terrible conflict in the near future. Men possessed of demons are taking the lives of men, women, and children. Have you ever seen anything like this now? Every day, especially here in Florida. Every day, husband kills wife and 4 kids. Wife puts kids in the freezer and freezes them. Another one drowns 5 of her children. Things that are just possessed, people that are possessed. On one occasion, when in New York City, this was written over 100 years ago, on one occasion, when in New York City, I was in the night season called upon to behold buildings rising story after story toward heaven. These buildings were warranted to be fireproof, and they were erected to glorify their owners and builders. Higher and still higher these buildings rose. The scene that next passed before me was an alarm of fire. Men looked at the lofty and supposedly fireproof buildings and said, they are perfectly safe. But these buildings were consumed as if made of pitch. The fire engines could do nothing to stay the destruction. Where did this take place? New York. What do you think it reminds you of? Twin Towers, right? Do you remember how in the news it came out, the fire engines, and they're looking up there and they're saying, well, we can't reach up there. Couldn't get any water. Before they even got to it, it was gone. That's how fast. But they were perfectly safe. That's what the experts were saying. The firemen were unable to operate the engines. The world, this is the context now. The world is stirred with the spirit of war. The prophecy of the 11th chapter of Daniel has nearly reached its complete fulfillment. Soon the scenes of trouble spoken over the prophecies will take place. This was called by her the last crisis. It was written in a book, Testimonies for the Church, Volume 9, page 11. Do you think that's coincidental? No. 9:11. Yesterday was the anniversary. This is how God works to let us know this is not just something in your mind. This is real. She called it the last crisis. How many people have you seen today that have said, you know what? After 9/11, the world is different. Is that true? Yes. The last crisis, I believe that 9/11 commenced the last moments of Earth's history. She wrote, great changes are soon to take place in our world and the final movements will be rapid ones. The world will never be the same after 9/11. It was truly the commencement of the last crisis and it all happened so fast. Look at the people falling out of buildings.
It's heartbreaking. That was what Don was.
There are the fire engines. New York City closed to all traffic. All flights canceled. All crossings to New York closed. Ellen White said that when this crisis comes, we're going to try to leave the large cities and we won't be able to. You can see why New York. It happened so fast. If you asked anybody today, where were you on 9/11, most people would remember. It happened at 10 or 11 o'clock in the morning and it was over by 2 hours. It was unbelievable. How could this have happened here? Nobody could believe it. I submit to you that one day we're going to get up in the morning, we're going to go to the news, and this world's going to be upside down. And Ellen White says, we're going to cover it later, she says, up to now, we get hit with something. Satan throws something at us, Katrina, and then we take a break. And the tsunami, and we take a break. And a volcano, and we take a break. But she says when this final crisis commences, it's going to be one right after the other. We're not going to have a moment. And here's why. Most people have had a whole lifetime to get ready for heaven. You have a man that has lived 70 years on the earth, and God has been writing his records in a book all of that time. He's given him opportunities. He has sent people with messages. He has told them read the Bible. He has seen Billy Graham and some of these great evangelists, and he has had a chance to make a decision in his life. But now we're come to the end of the world. And now you're coming through, let's pretend that this is just the timeline of time right here, this screen right here. And this man has been here and he's been just living, and now we come here, the end of the world. But what happens is that now in the end of the world, you've got a 17-year-old. Would it be fair for God to give that young man 60 years less of time to be tested than the 70-year-old? No. So what does God have to do? What happened after Katrina? Oh, it's the end of the world. What happened after Mount St. Helens? Oh, it's the end of the world. But people just go back to business as usual, right? But God has got to bring this whole system to a stop so that everybody can focus on, are you going to obey me or are you not going to obey me? It's the only way that he can bring this to a close. So there's going to be one final test. It's not going to be a hard test, but it's going to be a very hard test. People are going to be able to say, okay, the Bible says thus, but all these experts are saying thus. And you're going to have to decide, who am I going to believe, God or the experts? And then based on that, the universe is going to say, okay, Joe is ready for heaven because if he passed through that test, he'll pass through anything. God cannot afford to take one of us to heaven that's going to be unfaithful there. So remember that. The present is a time of overwhelming interest to all living. rulers and statesmen, men who occupy positions of trust and authority, thinking men and women of all classes have their attention fixed upon the events taking place about us. That's happening right now. They are watching the relations that exist among the nations. They observe the intensity that is taking possession of every earthly element, and they recognize that something great and decisive is about to take place, that the world is on the verge of a stupendous crisis. There's no one person today that would not agree with that statement. That was written over 100 years ago. Daniel 8, the battle between the ram and the he-goat. Keep your eyes on Iran and Syria. In Daniel 8, we find the battle between the ram and the he-goat. The angel Gabriel told Daniel this battle would take place at the time of the end. Daniel 8:17. In the last end of the indignation. Daniel 8:19. Daniel 8:2 says, and I saw in a vision, and it came to pass when I saw that I was at Shushan in the palace, which is in the province of Elam. And I saw in a vision, and I was by the river Ulai. Daniel 10:4 says, and in the 24th day of the first month, as I was by the side of the great river, which is Hiddekel. Notice these two rivers, the Ulai and the Hiddekel. Unfortunately, you can't find these rivers in the Bible today because their names have changed, but we're going to see it now in Old Testament maps. The light that Daniel received from God was given specially for these last days. This is Ellen White. The visions he saw by the banks of the Ulai and the Hiddekel, the great rivers of Shinar, are now in process of fulfillment, and all the events foretold will soon come to pass. This is written in 1896 in Testimonies to Ministers. Now, all the events foretold in Daniel 8, the only place, look at the note at the bottom, the Ulai River is only mentioned twice in the scriptures. Daniel 8:2 and 16. The Hiddekel is only mentioned in Genesis 2:14 and Daniel 10:4. The vision Daniel saw by these two rivers had to do especially with the battle between the ram and the he-goat. This statement was written by Ellen White in 1896. It follows then that this battle is yet in the future, since she was shown that all the events foretold would come to pass. Can we agree on that? This is a statement. She says all the events, it was written in 1896. Has this battle taken place after 1896? No. Now, there is a very, very famous book by Uriah Smith, a tremendous Bible scholar, that said that this battle took place in 331 BC in the Battle of Arbela. How can we be sure that's not correct? Because Ellen White is saying all the events foretold will soon come to pass. Uriah Smith is writing in his time. He sees that the world is coming to an end, like Ellen White thought. And he says, okay, then obviously we have to understand this book. This must be the Battle of Arbela. The Battle of Arbela fits to a T this prophecy. But the primary fulfillment of this prophecy is in the future.
Amen.
Daniel 8, 16 to 19. According to Gabriel, this battle will take place during the time of the end. Gabriel, make this man to understand the vision. Understand, O Son of Man, for at the time of the end shall be division. Behold, I will make thee know what shall be in the last end of the indignation. And in the 24th day of the first month, as I was by the side of the great river which is Hiddekel. Hiddekel is the ancient name of the river Tigris. You went to the Old Testament. In Genesis, there was a Garden of Eden, and out of the Garden of Eden came out a river, 4 heads. Tigris was one of those heads. The Euphrates is the other head. And the Lord God planted a garden east in Eden, and a river went out of Eden to water the garden, and from thence it was parted and became into 4 heads. And the name of the river was Hiddekel, that is, which goeth towards the east of Assyria. And the 4th river is Euphrates. The Hiddekel is known today as the Tigris. When Daniel had this vision, he found himself at Shushan, in the palace, which is in the province of Elam. And I saw in a vision, and I was by the river Ulai. It is in this small piece of real estate that Daniel received this vision more than 2,500 years ago. It was precisely on this spot that the Gulf War was fought in August 2, 1990. This small piece of real estate is easily recognizable in modern maps by the following 4 bodies of water: the Red Sea, the Caspian Sea, the Persian Gulf, and the Mediterranean Sea. Now, you see here Mediterranean, Caspian Sea, Persian Gulf, and the Red Sea. You see here the Euphrates coming down. And you see here the Tigris coming down. They come up here from the Garden of Eden in Turkey. They come down and they meet. They meet right here in this little Shat el Arab, and then they go into the Persian Gulf. There is Susa. There is the Karun River. I don't know if you can see it there. That is the Ulai. That is the river, that is the name of the Ulai today in modern maps. Okay, there is Elam. He was in the province of Elam, in the city of Susa. Okay? Now you see here Iran, and you see here Iraq, and it's going to be, these rivers are coming down this way, meeting into the Persian Gulf. Do you see why this little Shat al-Arab is so important? Because all of the oil from Iraq and all of the oil from Iran, in order to come into the Persian Gulf and go out west, has to come through that little 125-mile channel that is made by those 2 rivers. Shushan is shown in all maps as Susa. This is from the Open Bible, Nelson Publishers. If you will locate this area in a modern map, easily recognizable by the 4 bodies of water previously mentioned, you will be surprised to find that Shushan is known today as Shushtar, a city in the country of Iran. The river Ulai is the only river found in Shushan, corresponds to the river Karun, also found in Iran. The river Karun merges into the Shat al-Arab, the waterway formed by the confluence, the coming together, of the Euphrates and the Tigris rivers. It is in this small piece of real estate that Daniel received this vision more than 2,500 years ago. You have here the Karun. You have here where Daniel was standing right here, right before. You see Kuwait. This is why Iraq wanted Kuwait to control the oil. It's all about oil. Why don't we worry about Africa? There's people dying everywhere, and we don't worry about it. Why? There's nothing there. You know, why don't we worry about South America? It's all about oil. We go to Iraq and we go to Iran, it's all about oil of these great big countries that need the oil. You have here Mount Ararat. You have here the Garden of Eden, right here. This is where it all started. The rivers come down here, and they meet. The Tigris here, the Euphrates here. This is Iran right here. This is Iraq. Okay, just keep this little picture and you're going to see how that comes together. The strategic Shad al-Arab waterway, which is 125 miles long and separates Iran and Iraq on their southern boundary, was a major point of contention between Iran and Iraq prior to the end of the Persian Gulf War, which lasted 8 years. The battle for control of the Shad al-Arab, Iraq's only outlet to the Persian Gulf, dates back more than 400 years. The waterway has figured in at least 25 wars and is presently used by various countries, including Iraq, Iran, and Kuwait, in transporting their oil via the Persian Gulf. Is it any wonder that on August 2nd, 1990, to the surprise of the whole world, Iraq invaded Kuwait in an effort to control this waterway? This is the Karun River here. This is the Shad al-Arab. And this is where it dumps into the Persian Gulf. Daniel 8:3. Then I lifted up mine eyes and saw, and behold, there stood before the river a ram which had 2 horns. And the 2 horns were high, but one was higher than the other, and the higher came up last. Now, when I first started studying this, I thought, okay, when we hit Iran, we're going to hit Iran, Iraq, and Syria, and move them all out of the way. But as that didn't happen, we went back and studied some more, and it tells you very clearly in the prophecy, the higher horn came up last. They started fighting back in 1990. We're going to go through it. Let's go through it. Daniel 8:4. I saw the ram pushing westward and northward and southward, so that no beast might stand before him. Neither was there any that could deliver out of his hand. But he did according to his will and became great. This ram did whatever he wanted to do, and nobody could control him. The ram which thou sawest having 2 horns are the kings of Media and Persia. Persia, most people today recognize it as Iran. You go to a dictionary, it tells you it's Iran. Media corresponds to the ancient kingdom in the part of Southwest Asia that is now Iran, Iraq, and part of Syria. Media, the ancient name of the northwestern part of Iran, the country of the Medes, corresponding to the modern provinces of Azerbaijan, Iraq, and Kurdistan. Kurdistan refers to a region of Western Asia which is ruled by Turkey, Iraq, and Iran. So if we are now told by Daniel that the prophecy takes place at the end of time, and it's telling us the ram which thou sawest are the kings of Media and Persia, then all we have to do is go back and realize, okay, who is sitting today in the territory of Media and Persia? Persia is Iran, Media is Iraq, and Syria. This is the Great Sea. Here you have the Euphrates. Here you have the Tigris, Median Empire. Here you have Susa. Here you have Elam. This is the Persian Gulf. This is from old Bible maps. You can hardly find this today. It's very hard to find this. Daniel was shown a ram which had 2 horns, and the 2 horns were high, but one was higher than the other, and the higher came up last. I submit to you that Iran, Syria, and perhaps others make up the higher horn of Daniel 8:3. It may be that as many as 22 nations are involved in this. We're going to see that a little later on. Look at the size of Iran next to Iraq. If you had 2 horns, which one would you say would be the higher horn? Iran. Okay? And you see where Kuwait is. What territory, according to the Bible, do Media and Persia occupy today? Esther, chapter 1, 1-3, 63 years after Daniel. Now it came to pass in the days of Ahasuerus, this is Ahasuerus which reigned from India even to Ethiopia, over 120 provinces, that in those days when the king Ahasuerus sat on the throne of his kingdom, which was in Shushan, that's where Daniel was seeing, in the 3rd year of his reign he made a feast unto all his princes and his servants, the power of Persia and Media. So in 63 years after Daniel, the kings of Media and Persia were controlled by this king right here. And it says, from India even unto Ethiopia. This is what we're talking about right here. Ethiopia, we're talking all of this to India. Okay? Now, I submit to you, and it's unfortunate because there's good people and bad people everywhere, in every church, in every country, etc. But we're having a lot of problems with Muslims today. A lot of problems. And Muslims may not be part of the plan that the New World Order wants to take control of the world. And they may have to be moved out of the way. This is what my personal interpretation of how I see Daniel. And it may be that the plan is, look, if you're not going to join us, we're going to have to move you out of the way. This is what I see in Daniel 8. Maybe I'm wrong. That's just my take on it. Bush, April 1, 2002. The Bush administration accused Iraq, Iran, and Syria. What a coincidence. Fomenting error. Okay? Are Iran and Syria next? September 26, 2004. This is right after we had taken out Iraq. Iran-Syria pact raises eyebrows. Iran and Syria on Wednesday, they would unite. Why did the Bush administration accuse Iran, Iraq, and Syria of fomenting terror? Because it has not forgotten their behavior in the last 20 years. Daniel prophesied it. Let's review their history. Iran, its history from 1979 to 1998, but it will rise again. Iran, which had two horns, and the two horns were high, but one was higher than the other, and the higher came up last. Some of these texts I repeat because I know this is a lot of information for you to grab all at once, but you can go back and you can check it, and you can. From 1979 to 1988, Iran was a thorn in the flesh for the entire world. Only some of you may remember that, the rest may not, because we're into other things. On July 29, 1986, the Journal published the pictures of the top 10 tyrants in the world, and Ayatollah Khomeini, you remember him? Yes. Held the number 1 spot, and Syria the number 5 spot. This is the top 10 tyrants, 1986. There is Khomeini. There is Syria. This guy is still around. Libya, thorn in the flesh still. We're making friends, but North Korea, I don't have to tell you about him. He's now threatening the world. Here's the same players, they're still around. Now, Bush knew all of this. And they're fed up with the situation. But of course, Americans, how do you share this with the American people? It takes too long. And as a result, steps have to be taken, and this is what happened. Iran ready for decisive victory. This is 1984. You see Iran and Iraq. This is some cartoonist on the horns of an international dilemma. They were fighting between each other, trying to control Shah al-Iran, and the United States was saying, hey, we're going to have to get in the middle. No, we better not. Hey, we better not. U.S. News and World Report. Time, Iran versus the world. You remember Iran? Pushing against the entire world. I saw Iran pushing, and he did according to his will. That's Time magazine, Iran versus the entire world. Nobody knew what to do with Khomeini. At war on all fronts, just like Daniel saw, pushing northward, westward, and southward. Face-off in the Persian Gulf, almost went to war. The U.S. buildup is one of the largest since Vietnam. What will Khomeini do next? U.S. News and World Report, this is a chronology of all the places where Iran did terrorist activity. This is 2 pages in Time magazine. This is just the left side. You got Spain, France, Italy, Lebanon, Kuwait, Persian Gulf, all of the different places. Iran quieted down when Ayatollah Khomeini died, and Iraq, the king of media, with an army of more than 1 million troops, began in 1988 pushing on all fronts in fulfillment of Daniel 8. Iraq, the first horn, is history from 1990 to 2003. 4 U.S. presidents. Armed and audacious, Saddam Hussein takes Kuwait, and no one knows how to stop him. There is the quote again. Saddam Hussein continued to push during the presidencies of Ronald Reagan, George Bush, and Bill Clinton, until finally George W. Bush brought his reign to an end in 2003. Daniel 8, 5-7, we're going in order. A he-goat came from the west on the face of the whole earth and touched not the ground. What does that tell you?
Missiles.
Huh?
Flying.
Flying. It's an aerial battle. It's exactly what took place. And the he-goat had a notable horn between his eyes. If you had a he-goat that was coming and hit the ram and killed it, Who was the notable horn in that he-goat? Who was the one that was pushing the whole agenda?
Saddam.
No, I'm talking about you got Saddam here, and you got the he-goat coming, finally gets rid of Saddam. The he-goat is the United Nations, because the United Nations was the he-goat, but who is the notable horn? Remember that the he-goat had a notable horn between his eyes. The United States. We are that notable horn. And he came to the ram that had two horns, which I had seen standing before the river, and ran unto him in the fury of his power. And I saw him come close unto the ram, and he was moved with choler against him, and smote the ram, and brake his two horns. And there was no power in the ram to stand before him. But he cast him down to the ground, and stamped upon him, and there was none that could deliver the ram out of his hand. It is a big idea, a new world order. That's when Bush the father, made those words. Where diverse nations are drawn together in common cause. Only the United States has both moral standing and the means to back it up. Who can back up the United Nations? Did they do anything? They didn't do anything. In fact, they said, don't do it. Russia said, don't do it. China said, don't do it. And finally, the United States, who is going to speak as a dragon in the last moments of Earth's history, said, you know what? We're going to do it. China, you don't come along, we're going to do it without you. And we did it without them. Now, here's Bush calling for the New World Order in 1991. Now here's the Pope calling for a global authority on economy in 2009. This is the agenda, a new world order, where we have a one world currency, a one world religion, where people are going to be persecuted if you don't follow their plan. January 16th, 1991, war is declared on Iraq. That's 1991. This is not when we got rid of them. We thought we were finished with Iraq, but the Iran continued to push. Bush Sr. went in there, hit them with all we had, and could not get rid of Iran. Still around. 1992. Iraq still uncooperative. 1997. Iraq still not working. Here's Clinton. UN pulls arms inspectors. I don't know if you remember. Oh, we have to go and inspect your sites. Okay, come. They get over there. No, we won't let you in. Oh, we get upset. We're going to threaten you on sanctions and this and that. And we've been sanctioning and threatening for 20 years. Nothing happens. Nobody knows how to do with Iran. The showdown. Now, this is Iraq now. Time magazine, November 24th, 1970. Clinton facing off this guy. What good did it do? Time magazine. On just the first night of Operation Desert Fox, U.S. ships and bombers pounded Iraq with 280 American cruise missiles, almost as many as hit the country during the entire Gulf War in 1991. But still could not get him out. 2001, same story. Now, this is interesting, and you have to remember this. This is all the chronology of strikes against Iraq. Who was the only ally that the United States had when we were moving against Iraq? Do you remember? Great Britain. Look here, U.S. and British warplanes, all of these attacks that they did. This is very important because this is part of our study. All of these attacks, always United States and Britain. Okay? Presidents Reagan, Bush Sr., Clinton, and Bush Jr. The goal came from the west and touched not the ground. Okay. Daniel 8, 5, and 21. And as I was considering, behold, the he-goat came from the west, and the rough goat... Not a problem. As I was considering, a he-goat came from the west, and the rough goat, that is the king of Grecia, and the great horn that is between his eyes, is the first king. The he-goat must meet 3 tests. He must come from the west. He is called the king of Grecia, and the great horn is the first king. The he-goat comes from the west. The United Nations, the he-goat of Daniel 8, the one world order, United Nations, is the only power from the west capable of delivering a mortal blow to at least Iran, Iraq, and perhaps Syria. Cyprus, a large island in the Mediterranean Sea just west of Lebanon and Syria. Cyprus has been a point of contention in the past, Greece versus Turkey, and has become very important to the US and NATO forces since we are conducting our Mediterranean gunboat diplomacy out of this precise basis on the island of Cyprus. Of course, these bases are located on the Greek-controlled portion of Cyprus as demanded in the prophecy of Daniel 8, the king of Grecia. Remember? So Cyprus is divided into 2, there's the dividing line, and you have, this is the Greek sector, this is the Turkish sector, and this is where we have our base right here. Base aérea militar, that means military base. Cyprus, west of Iran and Syria, is home to the U.S. 6th Fleet. Here's that's where the U.S. 6th Fleet is, right there. And you see Time magazine saying the battle came from here. This is where we had it. We can't bring it from here. We're too far away, so we need that base in order to do the work. Cyprus to provide base for UN Iraqi weapons inspectors. The he-goat, the king of Grecia. There's that quote again. The first king. The he-goat's great horn is the first king. America, the notable horn of the United Nations during the Gulf War. No doubt that the notable horn is America. George W. Bush, President of America, the world's most powerful nation and leader of the New World Order, America's first king in the 21st century. We saw earlier how President George Bush, in his State of the Union address in 1991, had stated, "It is a big idea, a new world order, where diverse nations are drawn together in common cause. Only the United States has both the moral standing and the means to back it up." George W. Bush, following in his footsteps, is about to prove it and finish in Iraq what his father left undone 12 years earlier. Shittim. Shittim is another name for Cyprus. This is what it's proving here from the Open Bible. If you want, you won't find Shittim in maps today, you have to find Cyprus. Balaam prophesied 800 years before Daniel that in the latter days ships from Shittim would destroy Iraq and Syria and they would perish. Can you believe that? 800 years before Daniel, he said that in the latter days, you know what that means in the Bible, the end of time, ships from Shittim would destroy Iraq and Syria and they would perish. Exactly what happened with Iraq. Syria is still pending. And Balaam lifted up his eyes, and he saw Israel abiding in his tents according to their tribes. And the Spirit of God came upon him. And he took up his parable and said, "Behold, I will advertise thee what these people shall do to thy people in the latter days. Alas, who shall live when God doeth this? And ships shall come from the coast of Shittim, and shall afflict Ashur, and shall afflict Eber, and he also shall perish forever." Now, let's find Ashur and Eber in the following map. Ashur is a city in Assyria, or the nation of Assyria. It's a city today in Iraq. Eber corresponds to present-day Syria. In the following map, please locate Eber south of Damascus, Syria. Then locate Ashur between the river Tigris and Euphrates. Then notice in the other map that follows that the area between the Tigris and the Euphrates corresponds to present-day Iraq. Here you have Eber. There you have Damascus. So Eber is right in Syria. Here you have the Tigris. Here you have the Euphrates, Median Empire. This is all Iraq right here. This is Susa, Elam, etc. We've seen this map already. Christianity Today, in an article entitled "Iraq Rebuilding Babylon," 1988, Saddam Hussein portrays himself as the new Nebuchadnezzar who will lead the Iraqi people to greatness, and the city of Babylon is visible link to that greatness. The article includes an impressive picture of the Procession Way and the Ishtar Gate. But God said through Isaiah that Babylon would never be rebuilt. And before the city was finished, he used the ships from the coast of Cyprus to fulfill Isaiah's prophecy. And Babylon, the glory of kingdoms, the beauty of the Chaldees' excellency, shall be as when God overthrew Sodom and Gomorrah. It shall never be inhabited, neither shall it be dwelt in from generation to generation. It's exactly what happened. We can count on what God says in the Bible, friends. And this is our only hope today. As we see, we're losing hope in everything. We can't trust anybody. We think we have somebody that we trust in politics and they let us down. We have a pastor that we think is great and they let us down. We have a priest that we think is great and they let us down. It's sad, but it's just God telling us you can only trust one person, Jesus Christ.
Psalms 118:8. Put your trust in the Lord, but not your confidence in man.
That's it. That's what God is trying to get us to do today. 2003, still at it with Iraq. A he-goat came from the west and touched not the ground. Well, let's read this, yeah. And I saw him come close unto the ram, and he was moved with choler against him. Now, this already happened, but it's going to happen again. He was moved with choler. Iran is going to have to do something that is going to get us so upset that with choler we're going to say, hit him. And smote the ram and brake his two horns. And there was no power in the ram to stand before him, but he cast him down to the ground and stamped upon him. And there was none that could deliver the ram out of his hand. I have not been able to get this slide that I wanted so much, but you remember when that statue of Saddam Hussein was brought down, there were little kids stamping on top of it? Haven't been able to find it. Ran unto him in the fury of his power, was moved with choler. We will not fail, Bush said in the speech to the Congress. And boy, he came through. America, the great horn of the he-goat, speaks as a dragon. And I beheld another beast coming up out of the earth, and he had two horns like a lamb, and he spake as a dragon. What follows is a commentary by E.G. White in the second beast of Revelation 13. For those of you that may not be familiar with America being proven from Revelation 13. At this point, another symbol is introduced, says the prophet. I beheld another beast coming up out of the earth, and he had two horns like a lamb. Both the appearance of this beast and the manner of its rise indicate that the nation which it represents is unlike those presented under the preceding symbols. The great kingdoms that have ruled the world were presented to the prophet Daniel as beasts of prey, rising when the four winds of the heavens strove upon the great sea. Daniel 7:2. In Revelation 17, an angel explained that waters represent peoples and multitudes and nations and tongues. Revelation 17:15. Winds are a symbol of strife. The four winds of heaven striving upon the great sea represent the terrible scenes of conquest and revolution by which kingdoms have attained to power. But the beast with lamb-like horns was seen coming up out of the earth. Instead of overthrowing other powers to establish itself, the nation thus represented must arise in territory previously unoccupied and grow up gradually and peacefully. It could not then arise among the crowded and struggling nationalities of the old world, that turbulent sea of peoples and multitudes and nations and tongues. It must be sought in the Western continent. What nation of the New World was in 1798 rising into power, giving promise of strength and greatness, and attracting the attention of the world? The application of the symbol admits of no question. One nation and only one meets the specifications of this prophecy. It points unmistakably to the United States of America. And he had two horns like a lamb. Remember the buffalo and all the symbols that we had? The lamb-like horns indicate youth, innocence, and gentleness, fitly representing the character of the United States when presented to the prophet as coming up in 1798. Among the Christian exiles who first fled to America and sought asylum from royal oppression and priestly intolerance were many who determined to establish a government upon the broad foundation of civil and religious liberty. Their views found place in the Declaration of Independence, which sets forth the great truth that all men are created equal and endowed with the inalienable right of life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. And the Constitution guarantees to the people the right of self-government, providing that representatives elected by the popular vote shall enact and administer the laws. Freedom of religious faith was also granted, every man being permitted to worship God according to the dictates of his conscience. Republicanism and Protestantism became the fundamental principles of the nation. These principles are the secret of its power and prosperity. The oppressed and downtrodden throughout Christendom have turned to this land with interest and hope. Millions have sought its shores, and the United States has risen to a place among the most powerful nations of the earth. But the beast with lamb-like horns spake as a dragon, and he exercised all the power of the first beast before him, and causes the earth and them which dwell therein to worship the first beast, whose deadly wound was healed, saying to them that dwell on the earth, that they should make an image to the beast which had the wound by a sword, and did live. The lamb-like horns and dragon voice of the symbol point to a striking contradiction between the professions and the practice of the nation thus represented. The speaking of the nation is the action of its legislative council. In 1888, when the Great Controversy was written, the U.S. was not the most powerful nation of the earth. Only inspiration from the Holy Spirit could have shown Ellen White that the U.S. would become the most powerful nation in the world. And yet there are people today saying she was not inspired. How did she know that? Who else would make that crazy statement then? She made it. She made more than that. We're going to see it. By such action, it will give the lie to those liberal and peaceful principles which it has put forth as the foundation of its policy. The prediction that it will speak as a dragon and exercise all the power of the first beast plainly foretells a development of the spirit of intolerance and persecution. Is that happening? Is that beginning to happen now? Intolerance and persecution? Are some of our liberties being curtailed? That was manifested by the nations represented by the dragon and the leopard-like beast. And the statement that the beast with two horns causes the earth and them which dwell therein to worship the first beast indicates that the authority of this nation is to be exercised in enforcing some observance which shall be an act of homage to the first beast. Okay, here's Daniel 5-7 again. Putin, war would endanger world security. Ending weeks of silence about Iraq, Russian President Putin said Monday that a war to force Saddam Hussein to disarm would imperil world security. He's throwing the same words around now about Iran. Had Bush Jr. not been so under pressure because his father did not finish the war, he may have stepped back. But you know what? Moscow could not deliver the ram. Daniel said nobody would be able to deliver it, and Bush didn't pay attention to Moscow. World leaders had been urging restraint since August. Urged the United States, UN Secretary General Kofi Annan urged the United States to resist attacking Iraq, joining calls from leaders in Germany, China, and Saudi Arabia. That didn't help. Bush offers ultimatum to Saddam in address to nation. Says, hey, you better get it together or we're going to have to deal with you. Russia and China denounce strike on Iraq. Russia and China nor the governments of the world could deliver the ram. And ships shall come from the coast of Shittim. A he-goat came from the west. And it was all history. Gulf War II, March 21st, 2003. After the fall. Saddam's last stand. The tyrant is a prisoner. Daniel, as I was considering, behold, the he-goat came from the west and smote the ram and brake the two horns, but only one horn was broken. What about the second horn? Iran's quiet behavior since the death of Khomeini is not deserving of the he-goat's collar. In order for the he-goat to smite the ram and break his two horns, Iran will do something so horrifying that the he-goat, in the fury of his power and moved with collar, will finally destroy the second horn. Iran, the higher horn, will come up last. A ram which had two horns, and the two horns were high, but one was higher than the other, and the higher came up last. Iran began making its comeback immediately after the Gulf War in 1991. Notice the following in chronological order. Iran acts to boost military. This goes back to, let's see the time, 1992. This is just after the Gulf War. Iraq has just been defeated, and here's the newsline. U.S. faces old rival in the Mideast, Iran. Through secret deals with Russia, North Korea, and other countries, Iran is conducting a multi-billion-dollar arms buildup that is fast making it the dominant military power in the Persian Gulf. Iran wants the bomb, 1992. Iran makes new grab for power. As worrisome as Saddam Hussein is to Saudi Arabia and other states in the Gulf, they view him as minor problem compared to Iran. House members call for the overthrow in Iran. Can you imagine this happening today? 1992. And this is all the things that Bush knew. Bush renewed sanctions against Iran, 2003. IAEA sets October 31st deadline. This is in 2003. We gave them a deadline. Did they listen? They didn't care. They violated it. They find traces in Iran of uranium. The Bush administration said on Thursday that Iran had one last chance to comply. That's back in 2003, 6 years ago. Iran managed to make plutonium now. The concessions were announced in Moscow by Hassan Rouhani, the head of Iran's powerful Supreme National Security Council. Washington has urged Moscow to freeze an $800 million deal to help build Iran's first nuclear reactor. This is why China and Russia are together with Iran, and that's why none of the security sanctions from the United Nations are applicable, because Russia and China always throw the red flag and say, oh, don't touch Iran. They're not really that bad, because they've got money invested there. Images show Iran may be hiding nuke plants. Look at these images. They're hiding it. We're going to read it now. The pictures of the Natanz facility taken in 2002 and 2004 show that Iran has been trying to cover up the compound. We're really quite amazed at what we're seeing in this imagery, and we're also quite amazed at what we're not seeing. The 2002 images show buildings under construction, but in the 2004 images, you can see that they completely covered it with a thick layer of dirt. It looks like the Iranians have a fear something is going to try to destroy this building before it can make bombs. There's the buildings right here, and it's been totally covered up. Here you see it here. You see the road right here, covered up. The building is protected by 8 feet thick concrete walls, primarily to protect it against airstrikes. Also, the entrance to the main building consists of a U-shaped tunnel. This way, even smart bombs cannot soar or glide or crawl into the hole. The Iran connection, U.S. Newsweek. Workers in the Iraq heavy water plant, part of Iran's nuclear infrastructure, and China and Russia are helping them build the nuclear reactor. President Bush refuses to rule out war with Iran. Katani says his country is ready to defend itself against a U.S. attack. The United States is pushing for a peaceful solution to its nuclear impasse. See, right now, we can't really make this move unless they really incite us. We can't really make it, because the population of this country would go haywire with the situation that we have right now. Iran's call to wipe out Israel roundly condemned. Iran removing 40 ambassadors from post. China, Iran may finalize oil deal in March. Now they've got an oil deal with China and Russia. Bush warns of World War III if Iran gains nuclear weapons. This is big words. Bush and the people in this country are concerned that this could bring on World War III. I've told people that if you're interested in avoiding World War III, it seems like you ought to be interested in preventing them, Iran, from having the knowledge necessary to make a nuclear weapon. Iran tests new weapons, says it can easily close the Strait of Hormuz. Imagine the Strait of Hormuz. Iran announced Monday that it has tested, this is 2008, a new weapon capable of sinking ships nearly 200 miles away, and reiterated threats to close a strategic waterway at the mouth of the Persian Gulf. Up to 40% of the world's oil passes through the Strait of Hormuz, a narrow passage along Iran's southeast coast. This is Syria now. We're starting with Syria now, so you can get an idea of Syria. Syria and Iran, dealers in terror, back to 1986. North Korea joins hands with Iran. The unmasking of Assad, 1986. Linking Syria to terrorism. Syrian president arrives in Iran on surprise visit, 2003. Rumsfeld warns Syria, Iran against interfering in Iraq. There is the 2 leaders from Syria. This is just recently now, January the 19th. Moscow and Beijing carry a great weight with other IAEA board countries, and both have vetoes on the 50-member Security Council. They are opposed to sanctioning a country which they have strong economic and strategic ties. In recent days, they have expressed reluctance even to the idea of a referral. Soon, grievous troubles will arise among the nations, trouble that will not cease until Jesus comes. When this gets going, it's not going to stop. As never before, we need to press together. The judgments of God are in the land. The wars and rumors of wars, the destruction by fire and flood, say clearly that the time of trouble, which is to increase until the end, is very near at hand. We have no time to lose. The world is stirred with the spirit of war. the prophecies of the 11th of Daniel have almost reached their final fulfillment. After we hit Iran, the he-goat, everybody's going to applaud and say, wow, finally you got rid of that ram that's been bothering us for 20 years. Who knows what they're going to do? The people are going to actually applaud that we went and hit it. After that, everybody's going to be happy. And then we're going to see that the United States is going to lose power, and 4 powers are going to rise on the scene. And this is what we're going to study now, 4 winds of heaven. Therefore the he-goat waxed very great, and when he was strong, the great horn was broken, that's America, and for it, in its place, came up 4 notable ones toward the 4 winds of heaven. America, the great horn, what will it do to be broken? Are the signs beginning to show? We will revisit this question, but before we do, we need to find out the 4 powers that come up after America is broken. The 4 notable powers, Daniel 8:8. Therefore the he-goat waxed great, and when he was strong, the great horn was broken, and for it came up 4 notable ones toward the 4 winds of heaven. In Daniel 7:3, we saw 4 beasts come up from the sea, namely Babylon, Media, Persia, Greece, and Rome. This is what we've always studied. As Bible scholars, we know that these are the 4 empires that have ruled the world: Babylon, Media, Persia, Greece, and Rome. They came up from the sea. However, in Daniel 7:17, the angel describes these powers to Daniel as follows. These great beasts which are 4 kings which shall arise out of the earth. We have historically interpreted the 4 beasts from the sea, Daniel 7:3, as Babylon, Media, Persia, Greece, and Rome. When Daniel received this vision, he was troubled and asked the angel what these things meant. The angel said, these great beasts which are 4 kings which shall arise out of the earth. Please notice that this vision takes place in the 1st year of Belshazzar, Daniel 7:1. Nebuchadnezzar had already passed on, and shortly thereafter Belshazzar would invite 1,000 of his lords to a great feast, wherein that same night, in Daniel 5:30, he would be slain and the power would pass to the Medes and the Persians. So Babylon was almost non-existent. If these 4 beasts applied to Babylon, Media, Persia, Greece, and Rome, the angel would have never said, these great beasts shall arise out of the earth, when Babylon had already been in existence for more than 60 years. Do you see that? That's a very important point to pick up here. The first 4 beasts of Daniel 3 came from the sea. These other 4 beasts shall arise in the future out of the earth. The first 4 beasts were described in detail in Daniel 7:3-8. But this second set of beasts are not described at all. Therefore, we must look at the interpretation of the first 4 beasts and see if any nations today match that description. Daniel 7:4. The first was like a lion and had eagle's wings. This first beast is a coalition of 2 nations. What nations today use the eagle and the lion as a symbol? Eagle? America. And the lion? Britain. Okay? Very clear. America the eagle, Great Britain the lion. Have you noticed the coalition that has been formed by these 2 nations? We've already talked this. U.S. and Britain, 1986. All of this, we've already seen all of this. Always Britain and the U.S. together. September 20, 2001, Bush addresses the U.S. Congress and the attack on the World Trade Center. Who was the only prime minister invited to attend this ceremony and recognized as a friend of America? Tony Blair, Prime Minister of England. U.S. action in the Middle East to be the eagle's last scream. This is almost a prophecy. This is unbelievable here. Look at what this person is saying in 1990. U.S. action in the Middle East to be the eagle's last scream. Karen Elliott House of the Wall Street Journal writes that before Saddam Hussein goes down, he will take others with him. A U.S. attack could ignite an Arab states war that would do for the thrones of the Middle East what Europe's civil war, World War I, did for the thrones of Europe. Years ago, an author called Britain's attack on the Suez the lion's last roar. Britain is the lion. Is this the eagle's last scream? I submit to you that this is exactly what's going to happen when the United States hits that ram, Iran. After that, we will cease being the power that we are. We will still be the strongest nation on the earth, but now we're going to share it with 4 powers. And do we see that happening? Do we see China threatening us? We may take the money out of America if you don't get together. Do we see Russia throwing their weight around? This is happening, and we're concerned. Daniel 7:5, and behold, another beast, a second like to a bear. And it raised up itself on one side, and it had 3 ribs in the mouth of it, between the teeth of it. And they said thus unto it, arise, devour much flesh. Who does the bear remind you of? Russia. Russia the bear. This is 1991. There's the bear, and he's got perestroika, Lithuania, Latvia. Exactly what happened. Exactly what's getting ready now. Bush spent the day with the leaders of 3 Baltic republics, Estonia, Latvia, and Lithuania. Many in the Baltic countries are still bitter about the Soviet annexation of their countries and the harsh occupation that followed the war for nearly 50 years. This is happening today, 2005. Has Russia really ceased to be a threat to America? Is Russia teaming up with China? You know, there were those that after 1989, that the Russian wall came down, they were saying, oh, Russia is nothing to worry about. Let me tell you, Russia is taking advantage of this whole situation. And they are getting ready for a tremendous, tremendous battle that they feel is coming. Look at this, 1999. Yeltsin gets China's support, then blasts Clinton. It seems Mr. Clinton has forgotten Russia is a great power that possesses a nuclear arsenal, he said. Boris Yeltsin lashed out at President Clinton on Thursday for criticizing Russia's war in Chechnya, reminding Clinton that Russia remains a nuclear power. It seems Mr. Clinton has forgotten Russia is a great power that possesses a nuclear arsenal. We aren't afraid at all of Clinton's anti-Russian position, Yeltsin said at a meeting with Chinese legislative Chairman Li Peng. So he's got his buddy China next to him and he's throwing his weight around, right? I want to tell President Clinton that he alone cannot dictate how the world should live, work, and play. It is us who will dictate. And let me tell you, Putin is worse than Yeltsin by a long shot. Yeltsin's outburst delivered in front of supporters came after he secured Chinese backing for Russia's campaign to crush separatism in Chechnya. With restive minorities of its own in Tibet and the Muslim Northwest, China says Russia should deal with Chechnya as it sees fit. So China is saying, look, do what you got to do. We're not going to get in your way. Yeltsin and Yang initiated annual summit meetings in 1996 to draw the fierce Cold War rivals closer and build a strategic partnership. Since 1996, they've been talking to each other. These are 2 world powers.